Hello, and welcome to another episode of Becoming Competitive. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to evaluate upgrades or ships. And I believe I've got four examples. And each example has a couple variations to it. And now this is not necessarily going to be specific forever. But I want to go through the process because the last video I did was on how to create your list. So I figured this was a good episode to put back to back on how you should evaluate the worth or the points of the items you're sticking on your ships. Now, some things just get stapled to certain ships. Like, for me, Hate gets stapled to Vader. Fifth Brother gets stapled to Echo. Like, certain things just kind of, after a while, you're just like, this is the best, boom. But understanding why it's the best when you're building your list is going to help. And how to evaluate it and understanding kind of the math behind it, I think will also illuminate why some things are definitively better and perform better. A lot of folks are going to take for granted that something's better, but they may not know why. So the first thing we're going to look at, make sure, yes, we're doing fine here. Okay. I thought I lost my recording, but I did not. So the first thing I'm going to look at is what I've got up here, Crackshot, Predator, and Marksman. Now, I chose this because they are all bullseye, cheap talents. So, Crackshot, for those of you that you don't know, when you perform a primary attack, if the defender is in your bullseye, before the neutralize result step, you can spend the charge to cancel one of their evades. Now, this is a one-off. You only get to do it once in the game. Predator, they're in your bullseye, you can reroll one attack die when performing a primary attack. And then Marksman, if they're in your bullseye, you can change one hit to a crit. Now, we want to evaluate the value of each of these upgrades in relation to their point cost and what it would take for one to be better than another. So, the first evaluation I want to do is going to be Marksman versus Crack. I want to evaluate these two first because I think this is going to be one of the clearest examples of why some things are terrible compared to others. So, I've lined something up in Marksman. Now, for all of these, I'm generally speaking about your average generic ship, because there are absolutely examples where one might shine on a specific ship. Like Marksman on Merrick Steel may be the greatest thing ever. I don't know, but it makes sense. Merrick Steel likes crits. Marksman generates crits. I can see the synergy there. But just on your normal ship, like say I was actually going to put these RZ-2 A-Wings out there. Should I take Marksman or should I take Crackshot? They're both the same cost. Well, the reality is, Marksman isn't going to help me in terms of pushing damage through. So the only time Marksman is going to pay off is A, if I happen to get a shot in bullseye, and B, if they happen, I happen to get a shot in bullseye, then I happen to hit with that shot, and then lastly, they don't have shields left. So if any of those three things don't happen, Marksman doesn't trigger. So if I don't hit, too bad. If they're not in bullseye, too bad. If they've got shields left, too bad. Useless shot. Whereas Crackshot, I still have to, have them in bullseye. So that has to trigger. But then I don't have to hit for this to actually trigger. What needs to happen is they roll an evade. Now, against your lower agility ships, this may not be that worth it, right? Say I'm going up against a Millennium Falcon. I got a range 2. I roll my 2 hits. He rolls a focus, and he doesn't have a focus to spend, so my 2 hits just go through, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't get to use Crackshot. But guess what? I've still got Crackshot, so that's cool. But if he did spend the evade, or did roll the evade, I could crack it for that extra damage. The reality is Crackshot's going to start paying dividends on those higher agility ships. Now, in order for marksmanship to pay off, you need to put a crit into somebody's hull, and that crit needs to matter. So that's a lot of scenarios that have to go right for marksman to trigger and to be meaningful and be worth that 1 point. Whereas crack shot, all you got to do is have a shot and they have an evade. If that happens, guaranteed instant damage, period. I know what the result's going to be. The result's going to be an extra damage. That's great. 1 point, 1 damage. Whereas marksman, maybe it's into shields and it doesn't do anything. Maybe they just rolled the 2 evades, your 2 hits do nothing. Doesn't do anything. So here, I'm going to give the edge heavily to Crackshot for the simple fact that Crackshot's going to go off a lot more than Marksman is. Crackshot's going to be meaningful in the game more often than Marksman. I flew 6 crack A-Wings for a long time, and I averaged just over 3. It was like 3.3-ish crack shots I would get off a game that would actually deal damage. So for 6 points in that list, I was getting over 3 damage worth of value. That's insane. If I had those marksmans in there, maybe I get 1 or 2 crits into hull throughout the course of that game, which I don't think 1 or possibly 2 crits can even come close to just 3 damage. I just don't think it has the same effect. So here, I'm going to give the clear edge to Crackshot. Now, we're going to switch Marksman over to Predator. Now, Predator is an extra point. So it's 1 extra point, and it grants a reroll. Now, this is where you got to do a little math to figure out which one's going to be better. The fact of the matter is, if I get Crackshot off once in the game, it deals 1 damage, period. If I get Predator off, it doesn't necessarily deal a damage. So let's say I roll my A-Wing up, and I roll hit blank. And I have a focus. So I Predator my blank. Well, that Predator is going to produce a hit 75% of the time if I'm willing to spend the focus on the shot. If I don't have a focus, or I'm not willing to spend it, it's only going to produce an extra damage 50% of the time. Now, depending on what I'm shooting at, if I'm shooting at a Millennium Falcon, okay, if I roll that hit, I've got 2 hits, I'm range 2, that's guaranteed damage going through. Great. However, if I'm shooting range 2 at, say, an Interceptor, it's got 3 agility, it still does not guarantee I'm doing damage. Still doesn't guarantee I'm doing damage. Where the Crackshot bite. So the Predator is a upgrade where getting it off once in a game doesn't mean it's going to be better than Crackshot. Reality is, let's assume we have a focus to spend every single time we reroll our Predator. Well, that means the first time I reroll it, I'm gaining 0.75 damage. The second time I reroll it, I'm gaining 0.75 damage. So now I'm up to 1.5 damage that I've gained. Now, this isn't damage that I've done. This is, dice damage that I've gained as a potential. So if on one of those shots, they just roll the 2 evades, it's not really gaining me much there. I'm still lower than not. So the fact of the matter is, in order for Predator to start being more value than Crackshot, you need to be able to get your Predator off 2 or 3 times per game, consistently on each ship that has it. So if I'm running a bunch of A-Wings, that means every single one of those A-Wings needs essentially 2 to 3 Predator bullseye shots in order to be the same value as Crackshot in the game grand scheme of things. So they work differently, but when I compare these two, I'm basically just going to go, you know what? I'm just going to put Crackshots rather than Predator. Now, when is Predator going to be great? A ship like Soontir. Soontir wants things in its bullseye. And it can double reposition and move last with perfect information to get that. So on a ship like Soontir, is Soontir going to get 2 or 3 bullseye shots per round? Probably. In fact, a well-played Soontir may get 6, 7, 8 of those per round or per game. So in that case, I would lean towards Predator over the crack shot with Soontir. But if I'm flying some lower PS, mid-tier PS ships, and I've just got free, like 3 free points, and I've got 3 ships each with, a talent slot open, I'm just going to throw 3 crack shots in there. If I get 1 or 2 off per game, awesome. I spent 3 points and I'm gaining 1 to 2 damage per game. That's amazing. Whereas the Predator, not only do you have to trigger it multiple times to be better value than crack shot, but on the mid-tier PS stuff, you're not even guaranteed to. So that's how I'm looking at this set of upgrades and like why and how I would be making those determinations. Now the next thing I want to look at, we're going to jump over to Empire for a second. I'm going to throw some Phantoms out here. Boom. Just some generic Phantoms. Now, Phantom, if you'll notice over here, has no target lock. So there's 2 ways to give a Phantom a target lock now. The first one, passive sensors in the sensor upgrade. The second one is going to be targeting computer. Now, in my mind, just straight up looking at them, they're the same cost. They both kind of do the same thing. However, mechanically, passive sensors has a huge bonus to it. So if you look, these are PS3 chips. Well, part of the problem with lower PS3, if you're taking a target lock, is maybe you want to target lock that PS5 and it's not in range yet. Maybe there's 2 PS5s. You're pretty sure one of them's going to be in your arc. You can target lock either one, but you're not sure which one's actually going to be there when it comes time to shoot. With targeting computer, you have to make your decision at PS3. However, with passive sensors, you can take it, and then once we're in the shooting round and it's your turn to shoot, then you can take your target lock. In addition, passive sensors has the added bonus, if you don't need the target lock, you can take a calculate. That seems really good. So, just in a straight up comparison, if you're able to take passive sensors, because remember, you have to have a system slot, or a sensor upgrade slot, passive sensors is probably going to be better than targeting computer a lot of the time. Now, there are going to be times when targeting computer is better. Let's say I was running multiple of these targeting computer Phantoms. And then let's say I had Jendon. Boom. So I've got Jendon and multiple targeting computer Phantoms. I don't want angle deflectors, I want targeting computer. There we go. Well, Jendon only gets his ability off a couple times a game. So the reality is, once I take that target lock, I don't want to be wasting those actions further on. So if I'm willing to, say, throw some fire control on each of these guys and spend a few more points for that one-time target lock, and then a guaranteed reroll on a scary ship for the rest of the game, that seems like a good buy. So in this particular case, if I have the extra points and the slots available, maybe I do want to take the targeting computer to allow the fire control to be taken. It's an option that is definitely there and definitely can make sense. But in the straight up comparison, if you've just got a single ship and nothing else going with it, passive's probably going to be better than targeting unless you need that system slot. So say I really needed collision detector in this list for whatever reason. Well, I can't take passive anymore, so maybe I'd go with targeting. But in those two, I would evaluate it like that. Like, the passive has a lot more flexibility. However, if I'm building around the targeting computer, it can become better. So now, the next one, we're going to look at the shuttle. So here, I just want to look at regular PS1 shuttle with title and Tenet Psi without title. you'll notice both of these are 47 points. All right, both shuttles are going to give me 2 actions. So the first one, if I coordinate to a ship, that ship will get whatever I coordinate, and then my shuttle can get a target lock on something based on the position of the other ship. With Psi, if I coordinate to a ship, Psi's ability is going to let me take the focus if that ship took a focus. So essentially, I now am running into the question of, would I rather Psi give a ship a focus and get a focus herself, or a PS1 give a ship any action and then get a target lock? This is where it kind of depends on your list. In general, I think the double focus is going to be better because we talked about in an earlier episode, focus is generally just better than target lock. It's a thing. Because the Psi or this guy or Psi could spend the focus on defense, could spend it on offense, more opportunities to make use of that action. Where this target lock is only for offense, and if they manage to dodge your arc, you're just not shooting. Or you're not going to shoot with a mod. Whereas Psi, as long as something's in her arc, she can shoot with a mod. So, in general, I would lean towards the Psi naked here, rather than the upgrade here. However, let's say my local meta has got a bunch of PS2s and 3s, and I've been playing my Psi, and it's just not getting actions. Like, the first round of combat, it'll get in there and get an action, and then nothing. Because I'm being bumped all day. Well, this might be a case where, you know what? I'm finding I really want to coordinate boosts and barrel rolls to my other ships to help them avoid these bumps, and I want to move at PS1 so I know where my shuttle can land to coordinate. So if that's what your local meta is like, or what the tournament structure you're in is like, or that's what the meta shifts to generally, maybe we consider going to this PS1 because it allows us to get our actions off more, even though they're going to be slightly less effective overall. Because I'll tell you right now, I would rather have the coordinated random action and target lock 3 or 4 times in a game rather than just the double focus once. But if that's not a thing you're seeing, if your Psi is able to get his actions off most of the time, I'm probably going to lean towards Psi because I think just the double focus is so much stronger. So that's just in these two. This is like one of those examples. They worked out to the same points. They both had the same actions. But I was like, oh, that's a very nice little example of a choice you could make and different reasons why one might be better than the other, even though in average, Psi is definitively the better choice. Now, the last one I'm going to look at is Outmaneuver versus Juke versus Lone Wolf. So, we're an Empire. I want to look at some defenders here. So let's look at Ryad. Can I have multiple copies of Ryad? Nope, they won't let me. Okay, so we'll do Ryad, Vessery, Rexler. I don't care about the pilots or the points here. So we're looking at Lone Wolf, Juke, Outmaneuver. Now I'm looking at these three because they're 5, 6, and 7 points. So they're all pretty expensive upgrades. And now we need to decide why one might be better than the other. Now, Outmaneuver is... Defenders are one of the few ships where Outmaneuver possibly could be good at some point. And that's because you've got your white K-turns. You're going to be shooting a lot of times when things aren't pointed at you because of that, which is a very strong ability. You've also got Juke, and you've also got Lone Wolf. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of the Lone Wolf on the Defender, because the way the defender flies, it's going to be K-turning back and forth, which means it's going to go away from your ships, it's going to come back to your ships, away from your ships, back to your ships. So it's really hard, and the way it maneuvers is so different from the rest of your ships. You're going to be turning your Lone Wolf on and off an awful lot. So Lone Wolf is an upgrade that might see some play on something like Rick that wants to be off by itself, but in the defenders, I'm probably going to pass on the Lone Wolf. So now, the exception to that might be maybe I'm going to run Ryad or Vessery or somebody like that with a Decimator. At which point, maybe they're going to stay far enough apart because I want them as solo operators. Because in 1.0, I did run some Ryad Deci, and Lone Wolf worked amazing in that list. So it'll kind of vary on your list, but Lone Wolf is one where I'm probably not going to choose it unless the list speaks to me to choose it, if that makes sense. So I don't really want Lone Wolf unless I want Lone Wolf. It's one of those where you'll know when you want it. So we'll kind of ignore it for here because I don't think it'll fit in a lot of Empire lists right now. But now Juke can outmaneuver. Now to me, Juke is the clear favorite, but we're going to go through and figure out why. So let's see, we've got PS4, and let's put the PS5. And of course I messed that up. Make you Riot, make you Brath. There we go. So, one thing with Juke is almost like a double force multiplier in terms of, well, it is a force multiplier when you have multiple copies of it. Because the first Juke forces focus spending, the second Juke is just pure damage through, the third Juke, pure damage through. So the more Jukes you get in the list, the stronger it is if you have the offensive mods to go with it. Now, the reason I say Juke is definitively the better choice is, if I'm flying a defender, most of the time, as long as I'm flying appropriately and well, I will be doing a 3, 4, or 5 speed maneuver every single turn. Now, there will be the occasion I'm going to one bank for cutesies, but most of the time, you're just going fast because that's how the defenders fly. And if you're going to have that guaranteed evade every round, that means Juke is going to go off an awful lot of the time. Whereas outmaneuver is only going to trigger when you're shooting at a ship out of arc. Now, that could be incredibly powerful. It could be. However, if I'm shooting at a ship out of arc, one of a couple things has happened. One, I'm K-turning and he's not K-turning. Because a lot of times you'll K-turn past each other and shoot. And if that happens, outmaneuver is not going to trigger, but Juke will. Because a lot of those ships that are going to K-turn are doing a red maneuver. So unless they've got some way to get a focus, their Juke is going to be either dealing damage or forcing that token spending on defense rather than offense, which is good. That means your defender's not taking damage, but still has the chance to deal damage. Whereas outmaneuver, if you both K-turn, it's not triggering. Now, if you outmaneuver and they do a hard turn or something else, and you do have the outmaneuver trigger, now all you've done is strip one green dice away. Which, while powerful, doesn't actually equal damage all the time. Because if you're shooting at a ghost, okay, I don't lose anything. Yay. If I'm shooting at a Y-wing that's naked or just has a focus, the reality is, if that Y-wing's not intending to spend its focus on defense or doesn't even have one, that outmaneuver is only playing a role 3 out of 8. 3 in 8 shots. Right? Because he's only got a 3 out of 8 chance of rolling the evade. So the only time the outmaneuver actually does anything is when the dice you take away would become an evade. So you're only gaining, 0.37 damage every time outmaneuver triggers. Whereas with Juke, every time Juke triggers, which is almost every time you shoot, you're forcing their focus spending, or if they don't have a focus, you're just dealing a damage. So to me, outmaneuver needs to trigger almost twice as much as juke for outmaneuver to be better than juke. So at this point and these price points, juke just wins it for me. Now, there are ships where I might consider outmaneuver. Grievous, I believe, for Separatists, actually has a pilot ability. Wipe from a primary attack. If you are not in the defender's firing arc, you may reroll 2 attack dice. Here, outmaneuver is not bad. One, Grievous doesn't have action to an evade, so it's not even a thing we're comparing. So he can't take it, but outmaneuver actually kind of synergizes with his ability. So here I'd be taking it. But with the defender, because I'm going to have that evade so often, outmaneuver just doesn't make sense, because I would need outmaneuver to literally trigger every turn and juke to never trigger, when the opposite is true. Now this last one was kind of an extreme case, because I picked a ship where juke shined on, just as juke kind of shines on the Phantoms. But I did it for a reason, like kind of to illustrate the math behind why outmaneuver is a terrible choice. Because every once in a while, you're going to see someone show up to your local game store. They'll have outmaneuver on a defender, or a Phantom, or some other ship, and you're going to look at it, and instantly in your head, you should be going, this is either a new player, or he doesn't know what he's doing. Either way, you as the competitive player, 2 things need to happen. 1, as carefully as you can, probably breach the subject at some point. That's a really poor way to spend your points. Don't just be like, dude, that's a terrible list, what the hell? Because that's not going to help anybody. But if you're able to talk to them and bring up the fact that it's a really bad upgrade for whatever reason, that would be cool. And 2, you're going to crush this list, so you should be thinking, if you're on the competitive side of things, this is not a good practice game for me. They're playing a suboptimal list. They don't even understand why it's suboptimal. So there. But I wanted to go through these 4 examples just because I think a lot of people implicitly know that Crackshot's better than Predator on like a PS2, but they don't understand the math behind why. Like, as long as I get the Crackshot off once, it's done its job. Where Predator, I actually got to trigger that thing multiple times before it starts becoming a valuable tool. And it costs twice as much as Crackshot. The 2 Lambda comparison, I really like that because it illustrated same action, or same a number of actions, but the quality of action is slightly different. However, there is a case where the lower quality action could be better based on local playstyles or general playstyles in the meta. So being able to look at your list and analyze, this is working because of this is not working. Maybe there's a side upgrade or a different way to shift my points that could make this thing actually better. And so, I don't know. I felt this episode should be tucked in with the last one. But, yeah. I hope this was helpful. You guys have a good day. I'm David Kelley. Become competitive.